Hello, this is David McCormick with the Charlottesville Chamber Music Festival. I'm here with pianist Boris Giltburg, and he's going to talk to us a bit about Beethoven and maybe a few other things, depending on what direction this goes. Welcome, Boris.
Hi, David.
Good to talk to you today. I understand from our co-artistic director, Rafe Bell, that you are immersed in Beethoven right now, that you have been working on the complete cycle of the sonatas and the concerti of Beethoven. And I wonder if you
Yes.
could tell us a little bit about that project. And I'm curious to know if you're still sort of on track in spite of everything that's going on in the world.
Yes. So there are two separate projects in a way. The concerto recordings started already last year, and we were due to finish this year. It's with the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra and Vasily Petrenko, but the sessions in April were cancelled, postponed, and they're postponed to mid-October, which we really hope will take place. But at the moment between now and mid-October, it feels like an eternity, so anything can happen.
Yes.
But the Beethoven Sonata project does look as if we're finished by the end of the year. So it's a very different project because the concerti I've been playing since I was a teenager, all five of them, whereas the sonatas was a personal project which I took for myself late last year. I had only played 9 of the 32 sonatas before I started, and the idea was to learn them. And I thought, if I'm just sitting at home and learning them, I'll never have the discipline to be able to accomplish this. So then I joined forces with a good friend of mine who's a filmmaker, and we decided to make a series of videos of the 32 sonatas. But then Apple Music were interested, so and then my label was interested, so all of a sudden it became a very big recording project. But the main thing to say is that it's been one of the most exciting repertoire projects I've ever done in my life. And the biggest thing for me was a complete reassessment and discovery of how little I knew Beethoven as a person, as a composer, as a musician, as an artist, and how much greater and richer and more exciting and more humane he actually was than my image of him has been. And the treasury of music I discovered throughout the year is tremendous. We still have 3 sonatas to go, including the Hammerklavier, which is one of the new sonatas. So I'm working on it now, right now,
Wow.
just finished a few hours ago, and that was another that is another discovery because previously, if you'd asked me whether I wanted to play the Hammerklavier, I would have said no, because I always loved the 3 last sonatas, the ones that come after the Hammerklavier. But the Hammerklavier somehow for me felt too much a titanic struggle. I couldn't somehow connect to the fast movements. I love the slow movement because it's the depth and the personal expression were overwhelming, even just as a listener. But the fast movements didn't really uh, do it to me as a listener. But I've been so wrong. It was again completely the wrong impression, and I'm working on it now. And it's amazing. And of course, anyone who really knows the Harold Clavier will not be surprised to hear that because it is an amazing work. But I can only compare it to working on something like Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto. So a work which is symphonic in nature and which is just barely playable. But the challenge is, well, it's tough to explain. It's this feeling when you're pitting all your forces against something, but not against as in a fight, but it's more of trying to overcome yourself and knowing that the way it is written, that it is playable in the end, and that the music enjoys this visceral, physical relationship to the instrument. This is a sonata which could not have been conceived for any other instrument. It can't really be orchestrated. It has grown organically from probably not even from the piano which Beethoven had, but from his ideal imagination of what an instrument could do. Because I was thinking about that today. The modern piano is just enough for that music, like any of the big romantic and modern works. And I've just been working on it for 5 days, so it's very fresh.
Wow.
But that's the nature of the project, that because I had to learn 23 within less than a year and film
Yeah.
them all, so it's all very short periods of time. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where we're at.
Um, in a way, it's interesting that this project that is a very sort of solitary project comes at a time where we've been necessarily in solitude a lot. Um,
And of course, one could think of Beethoven, that he being in the isolation of deafness is an example of what it could have been. But I think we could take it further and say that from this solitude which Beethoven must have experienced, and we know from his letters and his correspondence, but out of that, he didn't come embittered or defeated, or um, he hasn't given up, but it's the other way around. He came back always overflowing with an unstoppable life energy, and his music is full of genuine light and joy. And this is something I think very tangible in the A major sonata, which Rafe and I recorded for the festival. But that's not an exception. Many works by Beethoven are like that. There is a life affirming quality to them, which comes from the inner core of his character, of his nature, which is life, and and a great love towards everything which lives, all humanity, all living creatures, which I think again can give so much positive and hope and support to all of us in these times, both performers and listeners.
yeah. I know that our audience will probably be excited to follow your journey with these sonatas.
Thank you very much. So the videos are being released every few weeks on beethoven32.com, and I write a blog about the learning and filming process. So I'd be delighted to share it with the
Excellent.
audience.
Um, Speaking of another online project of yours, this classical music for all. I
Right,
wonder if you
my
could tell us
blog.
about that.
That came because most of my friends are not musicians, and I was trying for ages to convert them to classical music, or at least to infect them with the same passion I was feeling towards it. And I would invite them home and I would play for them, or I'd invite them to concerts, or I'd give them my favorite recordings, and they bore with it very stoically, but I could see that it didn't click. And at some point, randomly, I had this idea. I started writing a listening guide for a specific friend, and I took a movement from a cantata by Bach, and I wrote, I think, 2,000 words about it,
Wow.
showing almost bar by bar what was happening in the orchestra, and what was happening in the choir, and how the music was reflecting the text, and how the changes of meter and harmony and polyphony, and as anything by Bach, it was extremely rich material, so there was a lot to talk about. And I sent it to that friend, and that was the first time that I had a reaction
Wow.
of one of my friends saying, I could hear what you're being so excited about.
Mhm.
And that gave me this idea of approaching the idea, of approaching, trying to share uh, my love for classical music via this route as well. And I think it's absolutely not necessary to know a piece in that much detail to enjoy it. But I think it is one approach. And I think for anyone who enjoys finding out how mechanisms work, how a clock works, or how anything works, which we only see as at a surface level, but there is something underneath which is hidden. And for anyone who is interested in that, to be able to look at a piece of music from an insider's point of view, to see this mechanism, and then to be able to step back and enjoy the music again, but maybe with some, um, I don't know, if appreciation, or at least noticing some of the things which are beneath the surface. I hope that would lead to maybe more interest and an enriched listening experience.
Yeah, that's excellent. You know, I'm a little bit I do this kind of this both things. I like to just take a sound bath in a new piece of music
Mm.
without knowing anything, and then I love to claw in there and find out as much as I can, and then try again. And
You know, it's interesting because in a way, I'm being a professional musician. I cannot hear a piece of music in the same way that someone who is not a trained musician would,
yeah,
and I have no idea what I'm missing. Because I cannot hear a piece written in a sonata form without noticing the signpost of the sonata form saying this is the exposition, here's the second subject. It's like if you see a written text in English, you cannot not read it because just that's how our brain functions. So it's I think it's as likely that I'm missing out on something, on some more immediate, direct experience of the music when it doesn't go via your brain filters, but just goes directly to your heart. So again, I really don't want to imply that only if you have the knowledge, then only then you can really enjoy the music.
yeah.
Not at all.
I wonder, just speaking of that, the piece that we're going to hear from you today, the cello sonata that you and Rafe have recorded, I wonder if you could give us just a few guideposts for listening.
Right. This I haven't thought about. Okay, so quickly thinking. Well, first of all, it's a very clear piece in its musical language.
Yes.
Um, in a way, it's a piece that would not necessarily lend itself to this kind of analysis because basically everything is audible and everything is on the surface in the sense that is that he pours his heart into this music. This is music which is very open, very sincere. It is full of light, this soft glow of the A major from the opening theme played by Rafe, and then the piano comes in. What's maybe interesting to note, especially in the first movement, is a almost fantasy-like juxtaposition of different elements. And rather than reusing the same material, he prefers to introduce a new theme. And he has this generosity of melodic abundance, which usually is not quite his thing. Normally, he prefers to take a very short motive and squeeze masterfully every ounce of development potential from it. And here it's in a way it's closer to Schubert of just one beautiful melody after another and another and another and another. And you get, so you have the opening theme, and then you have a dramatic theme in A minor, and then you have a second subject theme, which is a beautiful dialogue between the cello and the piano, and you never know who actually has the melody or whether both have the melody and they just swap characters. And then before the closing theme, he adds another completely new melody. Um, So we have 4 or 5 different melodies just in the exposition, and they're all catchy and they're all things which you can whistle afterwards.
Yes.
Um, there is an exquisite sense of beauty in this sonata in the first movement, but also in the what one might think is the slow movement. It starts like the beginning of a beautiful aria, and you imagine, knowing Beethoven's other works, that you will have now 10 minutes of this, but instead it lasts maybe half a page,
Mhm.
and it is in fact just an introduction to the finale. So he decides not to prolong this
Yeah.
beauty, but dive into a very light-footed, light-fingered finale, which is effervescent and sparkling, and it's just, yeah, like drinking champagne. It's marvelous. Um, the second movement is the only intense dramatic movement of the lot. Um, there's an interesting thing he writes there. He writes notes for the pianist that are tied, so they're held, but he instructs the pianist to change fingers on the same note. So in theory, it's a useless effect because nothing happens. And he does it also in a few of the piano sonatas, and there is a never-ending debate among musicians what he meant. And everybody approaches it slightly differently. And Rafe and I discussed this, and we felt that it could work if I would try, and also he, when he has the same theme, to play a tiny bit of sound on the second, on the tied note. So as if there was a little bit of attack on the second note as a, like an outgoing note. So we try that and see what you think.
Yeah, nice. Um, yeah, I have to say I listened to the recording this morning for the first time, and the iconic melodies are just stuck in my head in a beautiful way. Um, and also just the beautiful tone colors that are, I think, a hallmark of the piece, but also a hallmark of Rafe's playing. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beautiful clarity of your playing. Um,
Thank
we,
you.
we hear absolutely everything, which is just
Thank you very
marvelous.
much. It was, I must thank Rafe for introducing me to this piece because I have not played it before this recording.
Oh,
So I
wow.
learned it for the festival.
Excellent.
Uh,
Well, we're all richer for it. Um,
incredibly enjoyable to do it with Rafe.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope our audience will enjoy this interview and the performance.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.